I want to welcome you to the most remarkable journey you will ever take. We have long wondered about the mysteries behind the resurrection of the dead, or the transformation of human to divine. We have asked ourselves these questions. Why am I human? Where are we going as a human race? Why did God create us? In these next 26 weeks, we're going to learn the answers to these questions. We're also going to learn about the powers that lie within us, that creativity that enables us to prophesy, to heal, and to discern. Our sailing vessel that will take us from earth to the heavens is known and called the Nautilus. If you remember, the sea creature is one which always closes and seals off its chambers as it outgrows it and builds a new one. And we must do the same thing. For we must cease being what we are in order to become something different. And like the Nautilus, we must leave behind our old ideas and concepts. So please join me on this very wondrous journey. I'm your hostess, Elizabeth MacDonald Burrows. Welcome to another journey aboard the Nautilus, which takes us from heaven to earth. As you know, we're spending these weeks looking at the behind-the-scenes look at the resurrection of the dead. That we have always thought in the past that perhaps the skeletons jumped out of the graves and the souls jumped in the skeletons, and those that hadn't been saved stood in line for some terrible judgment. We have learned, of course, that that's not true, that the resurrection of the dead is a divine metamorphosis of human to divine, and that there have been people throughout history who have reached that wondrous state, and also everyone someday, sometime, someplace will also reach it. We looked at the world of mind and the cosmic sea, and I wish to continue on with that just for a short time. If you remember, we talked about the fact that we have a choice that we have to make of whether to delve into things that stimulate our lower mind or to delve into the things that stimulate our higher mind. And that by the utilization of those things that attract our higher mind, then we are capable of communicating with any of the great wisdoms who have ever lived. That the library of consciousness that has been contained in all of the great ones who have walked the earth and who walk it today is available to us by law of attraction, by our affinity for them, the writer, the author, and their works. Thus, by reading and studying the works of the great ones, we are drawn to them. This brings with it wondrous powers also. And the reason I wanted to mention mind in the cosmic sea again this week was primarily because we cannot truly utilize the powerful forces that are available to us if we do not master the mind. And of course, we cannot master the mind without overcoming some of the senses of the body. And one of the reasons that we apply these modest disciplines of reading the works of great wisdoms in order to develop our mind or to screen out some of the things that bring to us the lower mind, we are thereby starting to learn that control. For us to just get up in the morning and say, all right, I am going to control my thinking process all day, you would find it an impossible task. I found in myself, and I dare venture that it pretty much is so with every human being, that I can only control my own mind for a matter of sometimes a few seconds. Of course, that has changed over the years, and I can now spend longer periods of perusals and research without the stigma or agitation of the lower mind. But it was many years getting there. Most people's mind starts on one thing and is soon on to something else within seconds or even a partial bit of a second. And so we cannot control the powers. And when I talk about controlling the powers, I'm not talking about getting out there and saying, universe, stop, because I don't want you created. No, mankind does not have and never will have that kind of power. But what does flow through us is the ability, for instance, to see the future. But if we cannot use our mind, control our mind sufficiently to go forward and backwards into time, how can we see what has happened? How can we see what is going to happen? If we cannot again control our mind, how are we ever going to fully develop the world of psychology and psychiatry? We must be able to pierce the inroads of the subconscious mind, because it is impossible for our patient or our client to do that. In most cases, we must take the patient or the client through such things as dream therapy, interpretation of their dreams, or to scream therapy, or rebirthing processes, or simply ink blot tests, and a multitude of other things. And we talked about this already in one of the episodes. But it is and should be within our capability for us, the counselor, whether we are a psychiatrist or a psychologist, we should be able to know within a reasonable length of time, like 30 minutes, the very source of that person's problem. And by being able to bring the source of that problem to the consciousness or to the mind of the individual is 50% of the cure. It cannot be the whole cure. It may require weeks and months after that in order to what we call reprogram the subconscious mind. How many of you have seen something that's very, very difficult to get the sights or the sounds out of your mind? So when we have a thought that comes to us that is negative, adverse, or ugly, we have to stop long enough to think of something pleasant or something which is productive, and to move out of that slot which brings us into horror or into carnal or into violence, things that we have seen and things that we may have done. So we call this transmuting. And part of the process of the resurrection of the dead, or the transformation of human to divine, is that we have to transmute the carnal or sensual mind, that part that is related to the senses. So we have to purify. And in purification, we do that by transmuting, taking that thought and changing it into something that is productive and good. So we'll spend a lot of our time in the filing cabinets of the subconscious as the beasts and dragons of St. John's Revelation dumps everything out of the bottomless pit, which is none other, of course, than the deep recesses of the subconscious or unconscious mind. So this brings us then to the situation of the world of prophecy. There is only one prophecy. When we have seen the divine plan of God and everything that it entails, and by this I mean that when we see that that divine plan contains within it the prototype of the entirety of the future of our universe. In other words, from the moment the plan is conceived, before it ever manifested into a physical state, it had the completed engineering plan or prototype. Like an engineer who draws a house, the blueprint is there before the house is built. So the blueprint for our universe existed in the consciousness of God before the universe began. This means then that it is possible for one who pierces those roads of cosmic consciousness or the consciousness of God to see the plan as it will be one day, sometime, someplace, because the future has already been written. For instance, when I got to see the future of Earth, to know that mankind would never have an end, that we would change and become something else, yes. But the magnificence of this, the beauty of every man, woman, and child in the higher state of consciousness when wars had stopped and peace had come to Earth. It was a magnificent sight. So no matter what we may prophesy or we may think, our destiny is already fixed and is unchangeable. That which you will be one day is unchangeable. We have free will. Free will enables us to take the path that, any path that we want. But we may venture on 100 paths per se before we come to that realization of the thing that is in our heart. And when we find that one thing that is in our heart that we want to do more than anything else, generally it is very close to what God has planned for us. And ultimately our true happiness comes by following the plan which God has for us. He very wisely implanted in us the desire to do His will or to make it what we wanted to do most, even though we may not know that it's His will. So therefore, in every human being, it is possible to see their destiny, because that was written before Earth ever came into existence, before the universe ever came into existence. So there isn't any mysterious method in pursuing or perusing the path that leads to the world of prophecy. There are, however, many levels of prophecy. By this we're talking about not the divine plan, that one prophecy which flows through all prophets and all psychics, but we are talking about the various levels that we interpret it. We mentioned last week that we could take the Bible and give it to 500 people and we would get 500 variances of the same work. The same thing happens in the world of prediction and the world of prophecy. If we do not know and have not seen the overall view of the perfection or the divine plan of God, we are caught in those multi-levels, the physical of seeing things as they happen here and now. Or we may pierce beyond the physical to open up some of the senses, feelings, and emotions. We feel something is going to happen. I don't believe I've ever met anyone who does not prophesy. At least as I have traveled throughout the world, everyone's always telling me a bit about what's going to happen tomorrow. And so we have feelings. I feel like that woman's going to have a baby boy, or like some man came up to me one time, he said, "You mark my words, that pipeline to Alaska will be rushed through." Well, it was. At the time, I'm sure he didn't look at that as a prediction or a prophecy. It was just something that he sensed. It was a belief that he had. So many of these things that we do are feelings and emotions. And then we move beyond it to that level. Remember, all of our lower bodies, the feelings, the emotions, and the physical are all contained within that one sheath which houses what we classify our lesser self, or the Antichrist, Satan, or whatever we want to call this lesser nature of ourself. And then we may pierce the inroads there, and we may be able to look into the future. We may be able to perceive what Gene Dixon is going to do tomorrow, or is likely to do tomorrow, what the next president of the United States, who he may be. This is called prediction. It is fallible to the sense that what is flowing through of the divine plan, what is to be and cannot be changed, is therefore relegated to flowing through the subconscious with its predetermined patterns. This means that it's distorted like a radio beam going through atmospheric condition. It also then must flow from the subconscious mind through the conscious mind, the things we've read, the things we've thought, the things we've heard, and through our feelings and emotions into at least this basic conscious level of where we say, okay, this is what is going to happen tomorrow. So there is a difference. We may take a scene that is given to us from God, and we may interpret it 500 ways. 500 people may have 500 different views of what they have perceived. So for this reason, we consider that the world of psychic prediction, which is so much based on that, to be highly inaccurate. We're not to say there's not some accuracy. The divine plan is consistently flowing through all people. The more spiritual they are, the more accurate they are in predicting that which is going to be tomorrow, whether it has to do with an individual, a human being, or whether it has to do with planet or a country. But without this ability to take this mind and to drive it ahead in time, the mind is like a time machine. And as we drive it ahead in time, 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, 500 years down the line, we have to be able to perceive the images that come in as we do this. We cannot predict of ourselves. We have not within us the capability to be psychic or the capability to be a prophet. Whatever is revealed to us in reality is revealed by He who is the Lord of the universe. It is His plan, His future that is flowing through us. And it's how we interpret it and what level we interpret it that will determine on what we perceive as accuracy. So therefore it would be very hard to help an individual who is having deep emotional problems and psychological problems and illnesses in the body if we were not able to go into the body and to be able to see it more clearly than any X-ray machine or any scan that has yet been invented by man. Because there are no barriers in consciousness. That person is one with us. We are both one in God. Therefore God is flowing through both. And depending on what level is that illness, we would perceive it through the eyes, from the eyes of God rather than from the eyes of human. So therefore it's impossible to make an error in a diagnosis. We cannot speak, or I for one, cannot speak of these diagnoses in medical terms that might come up to, which a doctor might call them. But I did have a doctor as a client for 13 years, and if he were here today, he would tell you that I never missed a diagnosis in all of those years. And sometimes we would go over cases, 20 and 30 cases every Friday night, which were cases that patients that he had during the week. And I never met these patients. I never even knew their names. Basically, he would give them a name, and I would ask what the symptoms were, or he would give me the symptoms. And I would have to depend totally upon God revealing to me what that difficulty with that particular patient was. So when we have someone and we're face to face and we're counseling, the fact that we may tell them their destiny should not be anything that is so unusual, and that's always been there from the beginning of time, was written in them by God, designed in them long before the universe began, then it shouldn't be so hard for us to say, all right, this is your destiny, this is what you will be someday. This can bring us great comfort, in that I had a mother one time whose daughter was a tremendously wayward girl who had many difficulties and psychological problems. And I'm not going into the case history because there were many reasons why this teenage daughter had these problems. But nevertheless, I could see that one day, not this lifetime, but one day she would be a concert pianist. So the mother, who was having so much trouble with this girl, who ended up in jail from time to time and things like that, imagine what a consolation it is to that mother to know that, well, someday this child had enough good that they would be a concert pianist. So it brings to us a wonderful sense of knowing that we're important in the world. Everyone is equally important. Until you fulfill your part of the divine plan, All of the world is held for that moment. Because each of us must manifest our particular role on this planet in order to complete it. Even to the most hardened criminal, they too have a seed of that divine plan which must express someday. So therefore this greatness, this destiny that rests in every single soul, is a destiny that is great. Meaning that every single individual has a seed of greatness in them. And so that is part of the healing process to people who have deep emotional and psychological problems, is the knowledge that one day they have this important role to play in the history of mankind. Now we take that destiny which has already been written by God, and we can backtrack, and we can take that individual and we can start to guide them on the path that will fulfill that destiny. As they do that, they quit. I kind of describe it as like having God is kind of the finger here, and we're kind of the consciousness around this finger. And we have a tendency to go that way, and this way. And we never find happiness. We're always torn in either indecisiveness, or we feel we've made a wrong decision, or we feel we should have done that, or we should have done this. So we're in this constant state of mental agitation. I call it mental indigestion. And so now, once we have a divine plan, which is such an integral part of this finger, the person can now start to coordinate and come into harmony with it. And with that, of course, is going to come great happiness, because God is good, God is happy, and He brings joy into the heart of mankind as they fulfill the purpose He has designed for them. So with this ability to perceive the future is one of the most wonderful tools that God has given to us. It is not a phenomena, it is a natural thing. It should be, the utilization of perceiving the future should be as natural to us as drinking a glass of water. And it would be impossible for us to be able to have a harmonious life, a good life, if we cannot do this. And so it's sad when we have taken this very wonderful talent that God has given to us, and we now relegate it to being something which is the work of Satan, or the work of the devil, and it's against Christ. This perplexes me deeply, because no one was able to see the future more clearly than what Jesus was. I remember the time when he's up the well, and this woman tries to tell him that he is not married, and Jesus says, "You are right, you are not married." But nonetheless, she was living with a man. He knew this. If Jesus himself used the world of prophecy and the world of healing, I cannot understand why we should think that this is the work of the devil. You remember that in the days when Jesus lived, he was accused of the same thing, that he was the son of the devil rather than the son of God, by some people. Of course, we know that differently today. Even in his court trial, which was a fantastic court trial, and during my research on Jesus' life, which covered a period of about 20 years, I was able to get a transcript and a translation of the court trial. And when he is in front of, when he is standing there in front of Pilate, and Pilate, who does not really want to cause a crucifixion or to bring Jesus' death, and who so valiantly fought against this, at least for a brief time. Even when Jesus is standing in front, Pilate is telling him, "Your people call you seditious, the son of God." And of course, what brought Pilate down in the very end was when they asked Pilate, are you for Caesar, or are you of God? Do you say Jesus is king or Caesar king? Well, Pilate had no recourse then but to say, of course, that Caesar was king, and then he ordered the crucifixion. But Jesus was persecuted for the very things that we still persecute people for today. And we look at Jesus, we feel he had the power of God, but he said, these things I do, ye can do in greater. So therefore we too have these powers of prophecy and power of healing, and they are not the work of Satan. They are a natural part of this great power that flows through our universe. And we are so wise if we will learn to use them. And how do we learn to use these powers? The first thing in developing powers is that we have to learn to meditate. Meditation is one of the tools that we have that will enable us to still this mind so that we are able to drive the mind back and forth so God can use our mind as an instrument. God doesn't have a brain by which to think. He is pure consciousness. Thus, when he reveals things to us, he must flow through our mind and use our brain. So it's brought to us in the conscious surface. If we had the power to perceive the future, I was born that way. I just don't know really what it's like not to be able to. I've just been able to do that the whole of my life. And I think about the times that, for instance, I was shown I would have a terrible accident going from Dallas to Houston, Texas. And so I decided that I had to go to Houston, yes, but I would take the long way around, even though it was a much longer drive than it would have been from Dallas to Houston. So I took the long way around and went in from the south into Houston. The vision had shown me that I would have the accident at night. That would be, I would be sideswiped by a heavy semi-truck, and that I would be on the outskirts of Houston, someplace probably 10 or 20 miles out of Houston, and that it would probably be 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And at that time of night, it was getting dark at that time of night when I was traveling. And so I went in from the south. On that same night, it was dark. I looked down and I was running out of gas. And I was so deeply concerned because I wasn't to the campground. During most of my travels, I did a lot of camping, first by tent and later by tent trailer, and then students went together and bought me a motorhome. And at the time this was happening, of course, I was in the motorhome that had been purchased for me by students. And so I was so concerned with getting into the service station to get gas that I forgot that I had the air conditioner on the top of my motorhome. And as I went under the low overhang to get gas, of course, I tore off the air conditioner. But I looked back on that time. It had happened in the hour and in the time that I had been destined to have this severe accident had I gone from Dallas to Houston. Was this the residual of that accident? The very small thing that took place that was kind of there, but was not the severe accident that I would have had the other way? Yes, it was. One morning I got up and I said to my hostess at the time, I said, "You are driving today. I'm destined for a severe wreck. I would not be injured, but it will greatly inconvenience me." So she drove and no accident happened. Another time I was shown that my car down a very deep ravine, and I thought, I don't recognize the landscape. I was coming from that time from Wenatchee, and through one of the canyons, and some strange reason I made a wrong turn, and I end up on this canyon and driving very, very carefully because I recognized it from the vision that I had been shown that morning. And by driving very carefully, I was able to hit the main freeway and nothing happened. This is just some of the many hundreds of things that have taken place because of this ability to be able to perceive the future and to be open and receptive to it. Most people don't, because they are not receptive. They are so afraid of it. Why should we be afraid of things that are going to happen? Why can we not take a look at it and do something to ensure that our life is better? Because the life between destiny and here is based upon law of cause and effect. You have destiny, you cannot change that. And maybe your destiny said, well, you're to be a creator of electric lights. You decide you want to build airplanes. Well, you will go off and start to build airplanes, but for some reason you just won't be successful as if you, as you would be if airplanes was something that you were supposed to do. So by knowing that we're supposed to create the electric light, we see this, oh, I am to be the inventor of the electric light. How remarkable that would be to us, to know that we would bring light to mankind, that the future of our world would be changed because of this electricity that I'm going to create. To me, I think that is just the greatest vision of all. But for us, we can go off of the way and build airplanes, or we can decide to do something else. We can weave off of that path. And as we do so, we're going to reap cause and effect. For every action, there is an effect. We cannot do anything without an effect. For instance, we cannot do bad without receiving bad. Sometime, someplace, somewhere, we have to experience what we have given to others. So when we're very harsh in our judgment, when we have criticized someone, when we have been mean to someone, someplace, somewhere, someone will criticize us, someone will be mean to us because we have been mean to someone else. It is not a God that says, look, you've been mean, so I'm going to be mean to you. It is simply that God has so designed things that each of us would experience that perfect expression of effect for every cause, that there is no way that we can get away with anything. We sometimes look at people and we think, oh, they have gotten away with so much. I will mention, say, the O.J. Simpson trial, which certainly the first night that the event took place, I definitely knew whether O.J. Simpson was guilty or innocent. But as we went on, as people went on through the trial, as the trial proceeded, most people felt that O.J. Simpson was guilty, and only a few felt that he was innocent. And of course, once the trial was completed, the verdict of innocent was brought in, much to the consternation of the world. Well, if O.J. Simpson were guilty, and I suspicion that he was, definitely, then somewhere, someplace, he will have to experience what he has done. Is it fair to say that someone will kill him? No, I doubt it. I would think that the circumstances, as it was shown to me, is that in his next lifetime, he will be executed or imprisoned, arrested for a crime he did not commit, and pay the price for a crime he did not commit. So that is balanced out. It's just, God has just arranged everything so perfectly. So we try to be very careful that that we do good, that we look at things in a positive way, that we try to be helpful and kind, because we know that if we are any different, we must experience at the hands of others what we have done to them. Thoughts are the same way. If we think unkind thoughts, that person that receives those unkind thoughts begins to think in a negative fashion about us. For some reason they feel negative about us, and they may not even know why. The why is because we're sending negative thoughts. We're thinking about them with hatred and anger and jealousy. So we try to do with our mind the same thing that we do with our actions. We try to do good. We try to think good. And the one thing that I've found with trying to purify the mind and develop a more positive way, is that we're happier. We're not happy in negativity, because negativity is not the way of God. Negativity is in opposition to Him, and so naturally that creates in us sorrow and pestilence and unhappiness. And so to be positive, to act positive, to do good, to try to see the good in people, this brings to us a much happier life. And that's what we're looking for, is to have a life which is much happier. And our ability to perceive the future makes it possible for us. I've had some really kind of interesting things, not just dealing with traffic accidents, but in a period of 5 years, we went ahead and renovated 3 buildings for a school. They were all very large, 2-story buildings. And of course, that's a lot in a 5-year period. And by the time we were through with the 3rd one, I thought that I could never renovate another building. And fortunately, I never had to. But I remember those. And I had been shown, I'd just come back off of an international tour. I'd been out of Seattle for 2.5 years. My secretary at the time and myself were hunting diligently to try to find a place to hold the school. And it happened to be that one Sunday afternoon we walked into an uninhabitable place. But what was strange, or interesting rather, was before that I said, God, where will we be? And He showed me a fireplace. He showed me yellow walls, and He showed me just scrubbing away. Well, of course, when we walked into this uninhabitable building, there was certainly a fireplace, and there was yellow walls, and it was filthy. And of course, we just didn't consider it at all. Until the next day when my secretary and I was out looking again, I said, what do you think about that place? And she said, you know, I think we could do it. It has a room that's large enough for classes. I think we could do this. I said, all right. So we did it, and we went ahead and leased it. And sure enough, we scrubbed and cleaned and scrubbed and cleaned and scrubbed and cleaned. So while we were in the middle of the process of this, I said to God, okay, I said, I'd like to know what I'm going to be doing 5 years from now. I was shown this hallway with a crystal chandelier. And I just looked up and I said, God, you know, I don't doubt anything you tell me. But I said, I want you to know that on the allowance you give me, we can't afford crystal chandeliers. But 5 years later, we were moving into the 3rd building in the hallway, a beautiful building. Interior was just beautiful. And we moved in, and of course, in the hallway, we placed, was a crystal chandelier. I say was, I made certain that we took the chandelier which was out of there and went out and bought a crystal one, because God had not told me that I'd be buying the crystal chandelier, but nonetheless there we were with a crystal chandelier in the middle of this hallway of this building precisely 5 years later. So all these things that I was shown, they were just simply never wrong. And I found it so comforting and wonderful to know that we are so protected. If we are open to this, we are so protected that no harm comes to us. I think in terms of camping, when I was tenting and my wallet was stolen. I had no identification, no money, and here I am at a campsite out in Oklahoma. But I knew who had taken the wallet, and almost immediately I was shown who had taken the wallet. So a little later on, I called the mother of the boys over, and I said, I really want to talk to your sons. My identification has been stolen. And I said, I want to find out from them if they saw anything. And so the boys came over, and I said, you know, I don't care about the money in it, but I do care about the identification. I said, if you saw anything, please, or if you look around and you find my wallet, I'd be so grateful if you brought it back. So it was only about 30 minutes or so, or less than that. It seemed to me like it was about 5, but they were back with my wallet. They had dug it out in the middle of one of those big trash bins. It was a little bit smelly, but nonetheless, I just hugged them. I didn't accuse them. I just hugged them because I was so grateful to get my identification and driver's license back so that I could cash a check or do something to get money and funds. what would I have done if I would have been closed-minded to the impressions that God gave me? But instead, he showed me who had done it so that I could go to them and ask to get the identification back. So when people run down the world of prophecy, I'm really offended because it is such a beautiful gift that God has given to us, and it's one of the great means he has of giving us protection and showing us what we should do and what we shouldn't do, that it is just absolutely so wonderful. So we look at the world of prophecy. Once again, we need to understand that our mind, wherever it goes, shall gleam whatever we focus it on. So if we're going to focus our mind upon murder, then we're going to draw to us the negativity and the patterns of murder, not counting the consciousness of the crime. I mean, the consciousness of the person that was killed, murdered, the consciousness of the person that committed the crime. And is this what we really want to have in our consciousness? I think that it would be feasible and advisable for people to develop this tremendous intuitiveness who is in crime and violence, who is seeking, should I say, police officers and detectives and all that, should really be developed, highly developed in relationship to the intuition or the psyche or the psychic ability that is there for us. It is a part of our world of tomorrow. As we grow spiritually, we cannot help but also grow in these things so that we know what other people are feeling and thinking, so that we have nothing to hide. The day will come when we have such empathic connection because of our unity through God that we will always know what the other person is thinking and will not be able to hide hatred and anger, will not be able to lie. Since I was born with the ability in the world of prophecy, and I'm going to state this because many people think that I am very critical of psychic prediction, as we talked about on crime scenes or something like this. But I have a reason, because as I grew up and I was involved with the intuition the whole of my life, I definitely, in my younger years, before I had found myself walking upon God's path, I used my ability to see things. I cannot tell you some of the trouble this actually led me into. For instance, once upon a time, someone asked me who a nurse had been killed in Olympia, and they asked for a description of the killer, and I gave it to them. And of course, then who is the next victim, the one that can recognize him? So I had to call and say, you cannot use that in the newspaper because it would place my life in danger. And they said, I said, would you settle for a Democratic governor? No, they wouldn't do that. And I said, well, then you'll have to kill the story. Because the clarity of this ability that we have to put it into the wrong direction is to place us in the precarious position of having our lives in danger, certainly having our consciousness in danger. I worked on some of the greatest cases in the United States, and for instance on the Kennedy assassination and things like that. And so I know that we draw to us exactly what our mind goes out to absorb, and that if this is the life that we want to have this negativity and we want to have these scenes that we have to negate, then okay, fine, we can use the power that way. But I do know that if I were in crime prevention, and I think about that because I wanted to be a lawyer when I was young, and my grandfather was ballistics and handwriting expert and criminologist, chief criminologist of Multnomah County in Oregon. My uncle was chief of police in Oregon City. I was surrounded much of my life by lawyers and legal beagles, if you want to call them that. That for me, and of course I was going to be a great mystery writer, and as you know from the world of re-entry into embodiment, when we covered that subject, that most definitely my past had also been connected with the solving of crimes. But this brought to me the things that did not bring happiness. And by this I'm talking about in this lifetime, in this time, working with those kind of things brings to us scenes, emotions, and feelings that we don't want in us. We're going to draw that like a sponge absorbs ink. And so if someone says, well, it's dangerous, the world of prophecy or psychic, the world of psychic is dangerous. It is only dangerous insofar that it cannot kill us in the sense of destroying the soul. But it does help to destroy the mind and could place us in physical danger if we're really good and if we're really accurate. So accurate is this power that I could actually draw the face of a criminal, as in a case of a little girl that was killed here in Seattle. And then a short time after that, the police artist came up with a picture exactly like I had done. So I put that behind me many, many, many years ago. I think it was probably 25 years ago that I stepped out of the realm of any form of what we classify psychic prediction, used that great and wondrous power to try to help people who were having emotional and physical problems, people who were on drugs, to help people on with their destiny, their course in life, to help them to change their life so that they would have a happier life, the life that I had found, the peace and happiness and challenges that belongs to each and every one of us. So this is the world that is open to us, and we should use this wisely. And we're going to begin by actually learning how to still the mind. Remember, everything is inward, meaning that when we close our eyes and we still the mind, God is all around us. He is also within us because we are an expression of Him. Thus, when we are not preoccupied with the outside world here and we can focus inward, then we perceive the real events, the truth, the reality of what is. By this I'm talking about we perceive things out here. The chocolate cake looks good, and we'll eat that chocolate cake knowing that it brings harm to the body. In here we know that the chocolate cake brings harm to the body. We're not saying out there for you to stop eating chocolate cake or to stop eating chocolate. That would be about as impossible as telling you to jump off of the Brooklyn Bridge. Maybe jumping off the Brooklyn Bridge is easier than stopping chocolate. But we know inside of ourselves that we shouldn't eat too much chocolate, that we shouldn't eat too many sweets, that they're not good for us, and that they ruin our health. We know inside of us when we lie. We may tell a fib in order to get along with the outside world. We may tell someone they're beautiful when they aren't beautiful. Although I will say that if we look hard enough, we can find something beautiful in every individual. But we know inside. So we often deceive those that we deal with. We deceive them in business. We deceive them in our day-to-day relationship, because we always have this inclination to want to be important, to want people to like us, to want people to care for us, to want people to admire us. But inside, we know the truth. So we know then in order for us to find the happiness, we have to change inside. And that's where we go. I think of the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, which was so much like the Gospel of Thomas. In the Gospel of Thomas, when Jesus was asked about the kingdom of heaven, Jesus says, when the inside is as the outside, and the outside is as the inside, when the upper is as below, and the lower is as above, even when man is no longer man and woman is no longer woman, then you enter the kingdom of heaven. And back in the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, which is considered to be probably one of the oldest documents, if not the oldest document, dealing with the resurrection of the dead, or the process by which we can do this, it talks about what Jesus mentioned in the Gospel of Thomas. It said that through careful distillation, meaning through careful study and meditation, we raise that through gentle heat, we raise that divine spark in us. Then it descends again, newborn, so that the outside may agree with the inside, and that the inside may agree with the outside. And because of this, the inside is greater and the outside is greater. How can that be? That divine nature of us, which we have called in Western world the great Christ consciousness, that divine nature in us happens to be not only the Savior of the world, but also He is our perfection. He is what we will be one day. And for this reason, He has to have a physical instrument by which He can express through. We, the lesser nature, want to express the seed of greatness in us. So as He descends, that means that not only does He have a physical instrument, but we, the lesser nature, now have our greatness with us, so that we can manifest one day with that seed of greatness. And so we're going to make the inside as the outside, and the outside is the inside in everything that we do. If we are messy outside, I will show you a junky mind. If we are orderly outside, I will show you an orderly mind. You can walk into someone's place and you know the level of their consciousness, because to go on with the world of prophecy, let's say the buildings that we're in, they are alive. Everything around us is atoms and electrons, protons, neutrons. Nothing is solid, nothing is inanimate. It may give the appearance of an inanimate object, but even the plastic that we may sit on a chair, or the nylon in a carpet, still comes from substance that is a part of the laws of nature. So everything around us is alive. This means that every house absorbs the consciousness of those that live in it. So we can walk into a house and know, not the intimate details, not every single thought, but we know whether they're happy, whether they have a sense of beauty, whether they, where their consciousness is, whether they are dark, whether they have depression. All this is written in everything that we own and everything that we wear. So join me next week for another journey aboard the Nautilus as we take a look at meditation. I want to thank you for joining us on this special journey aboard the Nautilus, which has taken us from Earth to heaven. If you have any questions or wish to be on our mailing list, please call area code 206-362-4134. Area code 206-362-4134. Or join us on our website, Mystery School, one word, mysteryschool.org. The God in me bows to the God in you, and may heaven walk with you all week.